Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mediajel podcast. I'm your host, Guillermo Bravo. Today, we'll be discussing SEO 101 for cannabis dispensaries with Samer Alkis. Mediajel connects brands and retailers with cannabis consumers through our ad network of mainstream publishers, mobile apps, games, and TV. We help cannabis companies advertise on Google, support in SEO, and activate data with display advertising to support e-commerce sales. Samer is our VP of Search at Mediajel, bringing 10 plus years of SEO experience to today's podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Samer.
Hey, Guillermo. Happy to be here. Excited to be back.
Yeah. It's happy to have you, and hopefully you're all recovered from 420 last week.
National holiday.
Yeah, well, let's dive right in. Well, let's first kick it off with a little case study. So we're going to pull up a partner of ours in Maryland, medical cannabis dispensary that's been doing SEO with us for quite some time. So let me pull this up for you here. Give me 1 second. Right. So we're going to be talking, heavy about SEO today, diving into all the on-page optimization, for a cannabis retailer. So let's start with Haven. So this is a partner of ours up in Maryland. They have a medical cannabis store, and they were having some trouble acquiring new customers and growing their revenue. So their main problem was, they really wanted to increase e-commerce sales. So first thing that we do is an audit. I don't know if you want to dive in a little bit into, what you would do kind of off the bat, Samer, and before you even optimize the website.
Yeah. One of the big first steps that you want to take with any new SEO partnership is getting your lay of the land. You have to really identify where the gaps are on the website for your partner or for yourself. And then also the other element of this, you have to start identifying within the overall competitive landscape where you fit in, where the growth potential is. Mm-hmm. And that way, that allows you to really identify where your low-hanging fruit is. But also when you start building out your SEO roadmaps and you start really strategizing beyond the first month, where you really want to put your focus on. And a lot of that really comes out of those audits, your website audits, those competitor audits. It gives you a lot of information that you can. So that's really one of the biggest first steps that you should really take to start establishing your initial steps.
Yeah, and just, when doing that audit, I remember working with Haven, and, the first thing that we wanted to do is make sure that tracking was set up correctly. So, they were using a Dutchy menu as an iframe. So the first thing we did is we switched that to the subdomain so that we can have accurate numbers here that you're seeing today. So, if you look at the 2020 to 2021, this is one quarter in 2021 versus the previous year. I'm just looking at some of this data here. We dive in a little bit closer. So we increased their revenue for this quarter from 100,000 in online sales to 400,000 in online sales, with a 300% increase in transactions. Conversion rate went up from 2.79 to 10, almost 11%, which is massive. Average duration on site went up from 3 minutes to 3:45. So, the quality of the traffic went up as well. Conversion rate went up, bounce rate dropped. So people were spending more time on the site and visiting more pages. So it looks like 319 versus 526 on the pages. And then users, our users went up 120%. So we went up from 13,000 to 30,000 users. And a lot of those were new users. If we look to the right there, we can see that we had 12,930 new users in 2020, but almost 30,000 in 2021. So a lot of the efforts that we put into place, really had an impact on this medical cannabis store. And, this is the some of the metrics here, and they were spending, I believe, $1,000 with us a month, and over the course of 1 year, we generated upwards of 1.2 million in annual sales for them. So this is this is an ideal case study for us. It's just kind of showcasing what's really important in driving a campaign. It's first you want to do your audit, you want to select your keywords, do your on-page optimization and offsite optimization, which we're going to get into a lot of these topics later in the session here. So we're going to dive in deep to all, I would say all the first two sections here. And then we're going to launch another webinar, SEO 102 for Cannabis Dispensaries, where we'll dive in heavy into link building tactics and how to really optimize your website offsite. All right, Samra. Well, let's dive into some of the kind of the starting points, like when onboarding a client, what steps are you taking to kind of review their current SEO strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question, because one of the big things that you'll get, especially if you're working with partners versus working on your own SEO, is you've probably worked with somebody in the past more often than not who has done some level of SEO. And so obviously the very first thing, ask that partner, have you done SEO? Yes or no. That'll probably give you the quickest answer in regards to what you would need to do next. But let's say you don't have that ability to make that ask, or maybe it's another person at the company who doesn't have that background. The very first thing that I actually end up doing is a really simple check, because regardless of your SEO level of expertise, there's certain things that you'll probably just do naturally from like the 101 standpoint. Very first thing that I'll check is, what does the metadata situation look like? Does it look like it's in the structure of someone who is looking to optimize towards SEO? That'll probably be the first indicator that they've done something.
Okay.
Let's say you don't want to do that and you want to go for the bigger takeaways. What I'll then do is the two biggest things that people who do SEO fall into is buying links. So what I'll do is I'll jump into Ahrefs and I'll see, has there been a humongous spike in link building where the domain to link ratio is really unnaturally high, especially in a short time frame. Probably someone's done some SEO there. And then also I'll look at a tool like a keyword tool, any keyword tool like an SEMrush or something along those lines. And I'll start looking at their keyword visibility over the last, let's say 12 to 16 months, and then see if there's been any massive drop-offs in any kind of keyword visibility. That might indicate some sort of an algorithm update that might be tied into maybe something that isn't in line with what Google's looking for. So I'll make those initial cursory checks if I don't have the ability to ask the partner if they've done SEO in the past. And generally, they'll give me at least some foundational information to see what I'll have to correct at the start. Because if it is, let's say, really a lot of really link buying that's happening that we want to get rid of, that'd be one of the first things that you want to clean up, just to kind of clean up your profile overall.
So create a disavow file and submit some of those to remove them from your link portfolio.
Exactly.
So yeah, those are all great starting points. And I would just add, looking at get access to their Google Analytics and see like what the historical performance has been. If there's anything for the last year, 2 years, and beyond. See if there's any major changes in content and just organic traffic as a whole. Then, as you said, link building, like if you go into an Ahrefs or some of these other platforms, all of your historical data is in there. So your domain rating, your referring domains, your backlinks, everything is in there. So we'll be able to really just see the historical data and just put together some recommendations on how to proceed.
Yeah, and SEO at the end of the day, it leaves a footprint, right? So you can trace that footprint to its origins and see what was done. Takes a little bit longer because there's no real recording of changes, kind of like in paid media, but it's definitely a worthwhile first step to take, because it's really going to set the stage for the next phase of the strategy building.
Agreed. And before we even kick it off, what is keyword research?
Yeah, so let's say you've done all of your audits, you've checked that you or they haven't done SEO in the past, And once you've done your audits, both on the competitor and on your website, the very next thing that you're going to want to do is really start establishing your keyword sets. And it's really one of those really tricky topics because it's everyone has their own approach and everyone has their own methodology. And depending on who you are from a brand perspective, meaning do you have a lot of brand visibility? Do you have a little bit of brand visibility because you're starting your journey for the first time as a company? Your tactics are going to be completely different. And what I mean by that is the type of keywords that you're going to want to go after versus the type of keywords that you can go after really is variable depending on who you are and where you're starting off from. And so a lot of times what we recommend when we're starting off that initial keyword research is really breaking up your keywords in a number of different buckets with intent behind them. So your first bucket is going to be really those broader, high volume, very competitive terms that are your money keywords, right? And
like
those
cannabis store, dispensary near me, buy weed online, those type of things.
Yeah, those are the kind of keywords that we know that's where you're going to get a lot of your interaction with customers. That's where you're going to get a lot of your visibility. And that's where a lot of that volume is. Now, the downside to that is that if you're newer in the space as a company, you're not going to be able to really gain any real visibility quickly. And so you can really try to go after those keywords and start growing that keyword portfolio. But the reality of the situation is you have to really hedge your bets and not put all your eggs in that one basket and start looking at those other buckets that we're going to talk about. And so that next bucket will be really focusing on taking some of those primary keywords, like let's say dispensary in Maryland as an example. Yeah. That has a lot of keyword volume, a lot of competition because you're competing with other dispensaries, you're competing with the big Leaflies and Weed Maps, also .govs, a lot of competitors on that front space. So what you want to do is that second bucket is really about longer tail, we call them modifiers. And what that is that you'll take dispensary in Maryland and maybe you add another keyword or two to make it a little bit longer. So what you're doing is really trimming down the number of people who are searching for it, but you're also establishing yourself in a slightly less competitive keyword niche. And because it is associated with that broader keyword that's a lot more competitive, if you're able to build up some momentum for this longer keyword, there's going to be an association that Google will make between that keyword, your business, and that broader, more competitive keyword. So that way you're kind of tackling both at the same time. And that second bucket, when you're really looking to make some good incremental gains early, is where you should really be focusing in on. And that doesn't mean ignore bucket one, which is those broader, more competitive terms, but you have to be realistic about what you can achieve in a shorter window. And as you start building up that momentum from bucket two keywords, then you're going to start seeing this natural growth in your bucket one keywords as you're targeting some of those longer tail keywords. And those are the two primary buckets that I would say from a keyword research standpoint we look at. But then there's a few others that are equally as important if you're really looking to expand on brand awareness, because those are more going to be towards share of voice, which is like your brand ownership in this space, and then really bottom funnel conversion focused keywords. That's what bucket one and bucket two is all about: getting visibility, getting conversions, getting sales. But at the end of the day, you don't want every single keyword to be about getting sales because you're going to be really limited. So what you want to also do is you want to have bucket three, and this is going to be more informational based keywords. So education, information, and a lot of times this is where I see brands either lean into really heavily and they really go after these educational pieces, or I've seen brands completely ignore it and just focus on buckets one and buckets two. But those more educational topic pieces, that's where you're going to really start having that brand stickiness develop. So like as an example, let's say I do search for, as a first time customer in Maryland, let's say I search for dispensary in Maryland and I see all these different companies that show up and I'm not familiar with any of them. What's going to convince me to click on position number 4 versus position number 2 or position number 1 in the search results? And that's the tricky part about just focusing in on bucket 1 and bucket 2. If you have bucket 3, those informational, educational pieces, not only can you show up for different types of searches, different types of keywords, you're also building up your brand association within the space for Google. So you'll get more help with ranking for other keywords. But more importantly, when somebody does make a search for, let's say it's how do you pack a bowl as an example. Maybe that's like the long tail keyword that you want to create a blog around. The great thing about that is that you're probably not going to get a ton of revenue off of that post, but what you do develop is brand equity. So somebody will see that post, they'll click on it, and because they're going to be a little bit less, I guess, protective of that click because they're not buying anything, they're just looking for information. They'll go on the website, they'll make that association with your brand, and if they like the information you're presenting, maybe they'll get another engagement some other way through another search. But when they're ready to make that transactional type of search in Google for, let's say, dispensary in Maryland, and maybe you're in position number 8, you already have a brand connection with that consumer because of another post, another long tail keyword that's in bucket 3. And even if you're in position 7 or 6 or 5, because you have that brand connection, you're developing a little bit of that stickiness. That consumer will feel more comfortable going through you because they have that connection with you. So that's where bucket 3 is incredibly important. It's about that nurturing and that brand stickiness that really can help with lifetime value of a consumer for your brand.
Yeah, and it's really, looking at the buckets is, buckets 1 and 2 is bottom of funnel, right? People are ready to make a purchase. They want to take action. They're ready to buy. Where in some of the other, bucket 3 could be, like you said, information about consuming, like how many milligrams I should take for edibles, or what's the difference between sativa and indica, or how do I register for a medical cannabis card in Maryland? Like all these high level, top of funnel questions that people ask are, they're crucial parts of your content strategy, your keyword strategy, and then associating that state or city. For Haven, it's Brandywine is the city, so state's going to have a wider reach. It's maybe not as relevant because it's 100 200 miles each way. So you probably want to focus on like your city first, and then expand from there.
Yeah, I mean, that's also a great point, that even when we get into content a little bit later on, looking for local keyword opportunities that naturally make sense within your content when you're focusing on some of those bucket 3 keywords, those awareness and educational pieces, is also a great tactic to get more of those that local association created with Google. One of the biggest things that I've noticed with different partners is that a lot of them do go really heavy on those bucket 1 and bucket 2 keywords. And there's this ceiling that you tend to hit. And that ceiling is really associated with the type of information that your website is generating. And when all of your keywords are really transactional focused, the type of information that you can create and share with Google, and then that they'll share with their users, is really limited. And so when you start creating a lot of the same information over and over again, Google will just stop when it comes to rendering a lot of that information. So it's really about uniqueness, and that uniqueness can come from that bucket 3, which is a lot more towards the consumer education piece.
Yeah, FAQs, blog content, all these different opportunities so you can create fresh pieces of content and keywords for each for each target. As far as the keyword research, what terms and metrics do I need to really follow and know?
So when you're looking at your keywords and you're really thinking about the metrics, right? The biggest thing that you'll really see really frequently will be your search volume. And I'll kind of cover that in a second. Your average cost per click. That's what a lot of platforms will give you, even though I put a big asterisk next to that. And then you'll also see an example of, for that keyword, depending on the tool you use, what the search engine results page already looks like for it. So you get kind of a quick lay of the land, and you'll get like a difficulty score. Difficulty score meaning like how much effort will it really take you to get into striking distance for that keyword on page 1. So I'm going to go back to volume just really quick. And one massive misconception about volume is that the volume number that you'll see, and let's say it's dispensary near me, and let's say it's 1,000 searches a month. That's what all the platforms will say. They'll give you a number and it's per month. Now it's not really per month. What it really is that they'll take the total number of searches per year on average. We'll say it's 12,000. There's no seasonality in play. What they'll just say is 12,000 divided by 12. That's 1,000 a month. That's what that keyword is 1,000 a month. So it's not really seasonal based, but it's a good indicator. It'll give you an understanding of how competitive that keyword is, and it'll kind of tie into that competitive score. And when you're really thinking about your keywords, you have to really be honest with yourself about where you are in the overall makeup for that industry in your specific city or state. And if that difficulty score is, let's say, like a 70 or an 80%, and you don't have a lot of equity, I would start looking at those bucket 2 keywords a lot more aggressively, because those difficulty scores will be a lot less. The potential reach and searches will be a lot less, but it'll give you that entry point, that backdoor entry point into those more competitive keywords to give you that opportunity. And at the end of the day, when you're a business, what you want is you want to at-bat. You want to have an opportunity to reach a customer. And by looking at things a little bit more tactically and really being honest about where you currently are and where you can get in X amount of time, that'll really open you up to actually getting that at-bat with that customer. And that at-bat being your listing showing up on Google in a spot where you can actually get an interaction.
Yeah, those are all great points. And it's when you're looking at keyword research, you always want to find the best ways to identify hot topics for content. Mm-hmm. Like, what would be your recommendations on curating a content strategy?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I will default to 2 methods that kind of get baked into one. The very first thing is I take a step back from the keywords. I don't even look at the keywords, because at this point I probably have my bucket 3 keywords already defined. So I'm not going to do any more keyword research yet. What I'll start doing then is going back, and I'll do something called a content gap analysis. Okay. And so what that is, it's a fancy way of saying, I'm going to look at my content, and then I'm going to see, all right, what keywords does my content rank for? So article 1 is ranking for keyword 1, 2, and 3, right? As an example. Now, where are those keywords in the rankings? So maybe my first keyword is in position 5 on page 1. Who's in position 4, 3, 2, and 1? Are they articles? Are they not? And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to establish where you're currently ranking, who's ranking above you for those keywords, and then what are they doing from a content structure standpoint. And the reason that's important is that actually helps you define the next step of your content development plan, because you can have all the topics already defined, and we'll get into really identifying what those topics are in a second, but you also need to define structure and what Google is really valuing for certain topics. So when you're looking at topics and you're trying to identify those hot topics, I'll look at the competitor audit. I'll look at our content gap analysis to see if there's maybe any topics that are related to content that we're doing really well for, that we don't have really created for. And then I'll look at tools like Ahrefs or SEMrush. And I'll start looking at those from a data set standpoint, because like maybe there's certain topics that are closely tied into my bucket 1 and bucket 2 keywords as well, that we just don't have any information or content around. And I'll prioritize those topics. I think the topic selection is important, but I think the content format and the keyword association is even more important, because especially in the cannabis space, you're going to see a lot of the same content generated when you're starting. You're going to see a lot of posts about sativa versus indica. What's the best percentage of X that can give me Y? Or how to, bake a brownie, or how to roll, pre-roll, or whatever it is. You're going to see a lot of those similar content pieces. So, and you're going to probably want to create those as well at some point, because you want to have some visibility and you want to have a dog in that fight. Yep. But what you really want to do is kind of look at format, what's Google valuing, and then also when you're doing your topic research, how do you associate topics that are maybe a little bit more niche with those bucket 3 keywords to give you a little bit more of that fighting chance for visibility.
No, yeah, those are all great points, and you really have to take a step back when you're going through your research and really look at your structure, right? Your hierarchy, your priorities. Like, what do you the first 3 months of your campaign, like what are you really trying to achieve, right? Like, do we want to focus on transaction only? Do we want to, you know, consider different topics and keywords that, you know, are top of funnel, like, you know, best hikes in Maryland to do one high, or,
Yep.
you know, best entertainment in Maryland, like all these different topics. So it's really just, you know, prioritization, right? Like it's
Yeah.
I don't know, like on the content too, is like how many content pieces can you create per month, and all of these factors come into play when you're doing keyword research, right?
Yeah, and one of the most misleading statements that I think came out like 5 years ago, 4 years ago, was the content is king statement. I think everyone knows that. Content is very important, but it's
Yeah.
really the context of your content is king, because there's so many pieces of content that are generated, millions a day across the board. So it's not necessarily the volume of your content that's important. It's the context, what's in it, the keywords, the structure, what you're targeting, who you're speaking to. And I think that's where some content within the industry falls flat. And if we're really looking to get a leg up, that's how to approach it. Really thinking more tactically about what's inside your content versus just trying to create as much content as you can.
No, that's great. That's great. And then, you know, you already touched on, you know, keyword difficulty and really how to prioritize that, you know, based on your current authority with Google. You know, how do I track my website's performance for, you know, specific keywords?
Yeah. So when we're thinking about keywords, they'll come in two big tracking buckets, right? You have your basic tracking tools like a Bright Edge or an SEMrush, Ahrefs if you prefer, whatever it is. There's a lot of ways to track your keywords, and the simplest way of tracking them on those platforms is they won't give you information on engagement. They'll give you information on placement. So are you in position 5 on page 4? Are you in position 1 on page 2? So what you can do using a tool like SEMrush, which is our preferred tool to use, is that you can track average growth for every keyword and the associated page, which is really great because you can see keyword 1 is ranking for this page in this position, and this page being like your website page. Yep. So that's a great way. But I think that's kind of half the equation, because if you're getting really great visibility, you're seeing really big time keyword growth, but it's not resulting in any action, then you might have a problem, because you might have a keyword misalignment. So what I tend to do is I'll look at that information, because again, it's very important, and it gives you information on if you're doing right by your SEO strategy. But I'll take it another step, and I'll look at my keywords that I'm targeting. I'll go into Google Search Console, and Google Search Console is probably the most important SEO tool for any SEO, because it's only SEO related, it's organic related, and it gives you information that GA used to give you 12 to 15 years ago. What I mean by that is they give you information at the action level for keywords and for landing pages. And so you can actually see impressions. So how many times has your keyword served for, or how many times has your landing page served for a keyword in Google? But more importantly, they'll give you how many times keywords are engaged with. So you can see clicks, you can see impressions, you can see average position, and all of this information, when you tie it into your tracking tool like an SEMrush, will give you a good understanding of, okay, keyword 1 is now in position 2 on page 1. That's great. We've made huge gains there. We're also seeing, like, let's say, a 30% increase in clicks. We're seeing like 100% increase in impressions. So now you're looking at it from the lens of keywords growing, which is wonderful. And we're also seeing growth on the action level, which is the most important level to look at from a keyword standpoint. So by looking at those together, you can really start getting a good feel for where you're trending overall from the keyword positioning landscape. But I encourage everyone to get familiar with Search Console. It's one of the best tools for an SEO, and it really helps you get that extra layer when you're deeper into your analysis as you're looking at your keyword performance.
Yeah, so just to recap, you know, Google Search Console, you can look at, you know, impressions, clicks, you can look at all like the really granular details about the, you know, how your keywords are showing up in search results for your website domain. And then you can look in Google Analytics to see, you know, people actually clicking on those keywords and how they interact with your website. And that's where you can track conversions and see if those keywords are actually delivering results. And then SEMrush is where you can see, it's a third-party tool where you can track all the keyword rankings. And I remember in SEMrush, you can see like where your keyword ranks depending on the proximity to your actual location as well.
So they do have that, but I don't trust it as much when we're thinking about the local pack. What we tend to use when we're looking at, because the issue with local pack in keywords is that it will go off of where the provider, let's say in this case, SEMrush, is sending their searches from. So it's never going to be really that accurate for a local pack. So what we use is we'll use a tool like Bright Local, which has a search grid functionality associated for your local pack. And so you can actually get a much more accurate representation of your keyword visibility in the Google Maps results in different sectors. And we also use that for a lot of our partners as well. So I think looking at, there's a ton of tools out there. The big thing is really defining what your needs are and then how those tools can support your needs. One of the things that I tend to notice with a lot of our newer partners is that they have signed up for SEMrush and Ahrefs and Majestic SEO and XYZ, all these other tools, but they're not really used. And they're all great tools, but they all have some strengths and they all have some areas that they're not as strong on. So it's really about figuring out what you need, keeping your toolkit a little bit leaner because you want to use the features and all of the tools that you're really maximizing that you're looking to leverage, and then also use those free tools like a search console, because that's going to be information that none of those other tools will be able to get cleanly. There's a ton of tools out there. It's just being, I think, smart about what you need and then matching it with the right tool.
Yes. What tool would you use to identify like the keyword difficulty? What percentage would you consider going after? Is it like 65% and below? Like what are your recommendations there?
I think for the cannabis space in general, SEMrush is probably a good tool. They have a keyword magic tool on there that you can utilize. If you're not in the cannabis space, which everyone here is, like Keyword Planner through Google Ads, that's great, but not really helpful in the cannabis space. They filter out a lot of that information. When it comes to the difficulty percentage, it goes back to where we started, where it's really about where you are as a brand. I think that if you're a very established brand, you've been around for a while, you have a really great brand strength behind you, you have a loyal customer base, and you have keyword equity already. If a keyword that you're looking to target is, you have some foundational elements for some of those keywords that you're looking to go after. Like if you're having a keyword that's in this 70s and 80s and 90s from a competition level, I think that's doable over time. But if you're really just starting out, I would keep it more conservative. Really look at not necessarily the difficulty percentage, but look that step deeper. Look at who for your target keywords are showing up in Google on page 1 and page 2, where you're currently trending. And I think that will give you a better estimation of if you should really go after that keyword in the short term. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't go after these keywords that are difficult. You just have to kind of approach it with a slightly different lens than if you're a little bit more established, because you can tackle that keyword a little bit more head on if you have some backing behind you from a brand equity standpoint.
Yeah. There's so many opportunities there, and we've talked about the, I guess, high level keyword research tactics. Is there any like advanced strategies that you'd recommend someone to consider?
Yeah, well, let's say you're done. You're kind of through with all of your basic keywords.
You're ready for everything. Yeah.
You're ranked for everything. I think at that point, it's starting, and we'll get into this a little bit later, it's starting to look at what do you want to rank for different search types? Because a lot of times what people think naturally when they're thinking about keywords and ranking for keywords, they think about the map, which is very important for a lot of the cannabis space. And then after that, just a regular text-based search result. That's great. But Google's, for the last 7-8 years, has evolved beyond just your basic search result. You have quick answers, and you have all these other different variations of searches. So once you're in a position where you're ranking really well for a number of your core keywords, whatever that bucket would look like, I would start looking at different search results types. So if you're really looking to, let's say you have a lot of brand equity for those broader, really competitive keywords, but you're kind of struggling on that knowledge base aspect of it, I'll start looking at how do we start ranking for keywords in a quick answer? Because a lot of times a quick answer will be smack dab in the front of everything. In a search.
Zero ranking, right? That's above everything else. Even sometimes ads, right? So
sometimes I think sometimes depends on the layout, but
yeah.
I would start looking at diversification of search results. That's going to be super important. And then the same, in my opinion, the same foundational strategies when you're doing your keyword research still apply. You're just looking at a slightly different format, and there's different rules. But I don't think you can ever get to the point where you're ranking for too many keywords, in my opinion. I think it gets to the point of what type of user are you looking to attract, and how do we expand on that keyword profile for that type of user.
Yeah, and one thing I forgot to ask is, how many keywords should you target for one page?
Yeah, it's really dependent on the intent of that page, because you'll always have a page where there's going to be a primary keyword that's going to be associated with it, according to Google, right? So you could target as many keywords, I guess, as you want, with the exception of trying to keyword stuff. Because what you want to do is you want the content, whether it's a category page, a product page, a blog post, a home page, a store page, you want the content to read like it's meant for a human being. And a lot of times when people are trying to rank for 20 or 25 keywords on a page, it just is awful to read.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is you want that balancing act. I always will, like for our partners, we try to strive for anywhere between 2 to 5 keywords on one page, and 5 is really on the upper end. I like to keep it a little bit tighter. I like to make sure that the information is made for a user and not for Google, first and foremost. And then the second purpose of that content is for Google. And so try to keep the keywords a little bit tighter. Our practice is 2 to 5. And again, that also depends on the type of keywords they are and the type of page that it is. The product listing pages, probably going to be on the smaller side. If it's a blog post, maybe a little bit more, closer to 5. So I would say just be cognizant of the read quality and also what you're trying to achieve with that page, because at the end of the day, your website is a store for Google, and Google's the mall, right? So Google's going to give you better placement at the entrance of their mall if you have more valuable information that's meant for a user. And if you're trying to keyword stuff and you're just trying to trick the system, Google will just put you in the back away from the food court, and you'll never get any kind of foot traffic whatsoever. So that's how I envision Google: one big mall, and you're a store within their mall.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And thank you for all those insights in regards to keyword research. Like it's really there's just endless opportunities there, and I would consult with your SEO strategist, or if you have someone in house to just get feedback on that, and get creative with it. Right? There's tons of opportunities over there. There's tons of questions to answer. We didn't even dive into product categories, product specific, but it's endless.
It's endless.
Yeah.
You think that you're ranking for everything, I guarantee you there's huge opportunity somewhere that you're potentially not growing into as heavily as you can. So it's an endless supply. So if you're an SEO person, that's great, because that means endless for you. But if you're also a business owner, that means endless growth potential depending on where you are.
Yeah. Well, let's transition to the competitor audit. So, completing a competitive analysis report allows you to review the overall market, competitors in the space, and reveals the current search landscape for important keywords. A competitor analysis can help you with benchmarking your current SEO performance, as you said, Samer. Identifying different areas of improvement for your strategy. Reveal any competitor gaps or weaknesses or keyword gaps, and then discover your competitors' winning strategies. So, I guess for you, Samer, why is it important to do a competitor audit?
I personally feel that the competitor audit is one of the top 3 most important things to do in your first 2 weeks of your SEO work for yourself or for a partner. And really the main reason behind that is it really does give you an understanding of where you sit. Also, it gives you a huge understanding of if let's say you're looking at 5 competitors, if a couple of them are doing really well, you can really see what Google is valuing in your space, in your geo, in your industry. Now, again, it's not really about taking ideas and trying to replicate them, because you're probably going to not outrank them. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to cut that learning curve for yourself as much as possible. And so you don't really want to start from square 0 if you can start from square, 5. Those are horrible analogies there. But anyway, you kind of want to cut that learning curve as quickly as possible. And that competitor audit, looking at your competition, the landscape, what's working, what's not working for them, will give you an understanding of how to break up your strategy from a tactical standpoint and kind of grow a little bit quicker than you would if you were just focusing on your own website from an audit standpoint. So it's super important to do that at the start and as early as possible. And when you're looking at your competitor landscape, what I encourage everyone to do is treat it like those websites are your website. So audit them on the technical side, audit them on the keyword side, on the content side, on the link building side. Really look at it. It's time consuming, 100% it is. But all that time you're investing there will save you tons of time in the future. And treating like those competitors like they're your website will also give you something to strive for. So if you do have a couple of gorillas in the room, you can then say, all right, this is my North Star that I'm trying to grow towards. And then you can start benchmarking yourselves against them over the next 6, 12 months to see if your actual rate of growth is passing their rate of growth. And if they're seeing drop-offs, you can then say, oh, this is what I should be avoiding because Google's averagely, hitting them on the wrist here. Let's not go in that direction. So it's kind of like a cheat sheet for you if you look at it correctly.
Yeah, it's really establishing that benchmark, seeing where you rank versus your competitors, right? How the quality of their content is compared to yours. What type of content they're producing. Is it long, like let's say 3,000 word posts, like really extensive in-depth pages, or they're doing 500 word blog posts? And also like seeing if their websites are responsive, right? And if the page speed of their website is different than yours, because these are all factors that come into play when you're trying to rank on Google. So as far as in addition to that, like, are there any top 3 things that you should be taking notes for in the competitive analysis report? You said a few of them. There's anything that we missed?
I would say the 3 things when you're focusing on the takeaways, not what to look for exclusively, but the takeaways. I would say content footprint, on-site and off-site. That's huge. But it's not only the volume of content. You hit on this just a few seconds ago. It's the quality and positioning of that content. Do they have 100 blog posts that are really thin? Do they have, let's say, 50 blog posts that are really informational, long form, that are ranking for different keyword varieties and in different types of search results? That's super important. You need to understand the lay of the land, because if you find a competitor that is just doing a fantastic job on the content side, and you're not going to be doing content at the same type of velocity and the same kind of structure, then you're going to really struggle to overtake them over time. The other portion of this is something that we haven't really touched on that heavily, but you just hit on a second ago. It's really the internal functionality of the website. So page speed is the first thing that comes to mind. Core Web Vitals is part of the algorithm. That's also important, and that's tied into page speed. And this stuff is more on the UX side of things. It's really about how that user experience will be enhanced for an inbound user, and Google takes that really seriously. And then the very last thing is, when you're looking at your competitors, the big takeaway is their keyword footprint. That's important as well. Are they doing a fantastic job of ranking for just their brand? Is that all they're ranking for in brand variations? Then you're, as a competitor, in a great spot, because they've obviously neglected their non-brand keyword growth. But it also gives you understanding, and it kind of gives you a peek behind the curtain on their strategy and what they're focusing on and where their priorities lie. If they're really growing and they have this great content network and they have this amazing set of long tail keywords that they're ranking for, they probably value that type of work on the SEO side. So it kind of gives you a peek, but it also gives you understanding of where the opportunities lie on the content side of things. So those would be the three big ones that I would probably take out of the audit to look at first as the priority pass through.
And what about if I'm in Maryland, or let's say I'm in Illinois, and I'm a one store family owned business, and all of my competitors are huge players with big budgets. Like, how do you compete on that level?
That's the hardest part of this entire SEO workflow that we tend to do is we do run into that quite a bit. And one of the things that I will always be upfront with our partners about is expectation setting. I know this isn't the question, but it's really being true to and being truthful with yourself of what to expect, whether you're doing SEO on your own or you're working with a partner or an agency, you have an internal team member who's doing it. If you're a kind of starting the journey, or you're a single store operator and you don't have a lot of influence yet, and there's a lot of those bigger players in the market near you, you have to be realistic about your time frame for growth, right? That's step number one. But what I would say is when we're looking at these smaller single store operators, there's huge opportunity there. And the opportunity is geo-specific to your store surroundings. So what I will always look at is, okay, let's say there's a bigger competitor that's 2 blocks down. That's 2 blocks of separation. So how can you maximize your visibility and your reach on the keyword side that is within those 2 blocks? Because what you want to own is that immediate space around you. And that's the space that they're going to have a really hard time owning because they're not that close to you. So you want to own that immediate surrounding area from the keywords landscape perspective, some of those content pieces. You want to like really make sure you're expanding around your immediate store location. And then after that, that's where the competitor audit starts kicking in. Where do you want to grow as a business? Is it really, let's say you're really into CBD. That's your business. That's what you want to expand on. All right. Do your competitors have that same focus? And if they do, what's their visibility and footprint look like? And then from there, working your way backwards into a strategy that can really pierce into the gaps that they have. Because realistically, we've worked with some pretty big partners on our side on the dispensary end who are multi-store operators, and they do have a lot of great footholds in big areas, but there's always gaps in their keyword portfolio or the content portfolio or the link building portfolio or whatever. And you'll be surprised how often these bigger MSOs will have a lot of technical issues on their website that they just gloss over. And so looking at that also and saying, all right, if I can keep my site really technically clean, all my metadata is set up correctly, I have schema, page speed is firing great, all these other things that Google values, I can promise you 9 times out of 10, these big operators don't have the resources or don't put the effort into those. You'll be able to make up some ground in that area, and then you'll start compounding that growth really quickly by being a little bit more strategic. You don't have to have a big bucket of dollars. I mean, it helps. It definitely helps. But if you're smart about your dollar allocation and your investment and how to use it, you can really grow. And you just have to be, again, realistic about timeline, because there's going to be a slightly bigger window when you have a little bit less investment to work off of.
Yeah, and then really consider, there's a couple free tactics that you can do that can, really establish you as a business. And if you do have great customer service, a really expansive product catalog, competitive pricing, really push your competitors to give you feedback on those and give you Google reviews. And that's going to be one way that you can compete like hand in hand with all the MSOs. Like if you're in the local pack, you get to 100 reviews, get to 300, 500, then 1,000. That will give you a chance to really compete against the big partners, right? And the big retailers.
Great points.
Then after you've done the keyword research, like where do you implement the top keywords?
Yeah, that's another part of this, because a lot of people, they just take those keywords and start spraying them everywhere on the site.
Yeah.
Every opportunity. I've seen people put keywords in the footer. I've seen them embed them in hidden text on blogs. As more the better. You don't want to do that. you want your keywords to really be associated with the landing page of focus. So what you want to do is when you're taking your keywords, the main areas that you want to really identify for placement of your keywords will be your title tags. That's going to be very important. Your H1s, your headers, your H1s, H2s. How do you incorporate keywords into those elements? And then your on-site anchor text. You don't want to have exact match anchor text, which we'll get into a little bit later, but you want to have some of those keywords naturally inserted in a readable format within your content across your blogs or across your other landing pages. And then also if you're doing any kind of link building, you're working with a third-party website, trying to get a link from them, whether you're providing them content or not, giving them that keyword with an associated landing page would also be beneficial. But if you're just focusing on your website, I would say your title tags, also your meta description will be helpful. H1s, H2s, H3s if you have them. And those would be really important to embed. And then also it doesn't hurt, but it has to be natural. Incorporating it within your URL structure. That's also important. But again, I've seen people go a little overboard with that. It's helpful, but it's not going to make or break you in any way. But it will give you, it'll give the search engines and the users an understanding of at the URL level what your page is about. But again, that last part, I think you should do it delicately.
Yeah, so this is an example of a location here. We have Ann Arbor. So can you see this, Sam, or does it show you Ann Arbor Cannabis Dispensary? Okay.
Absolutely.
So that's the title tag there. And meta description is going to be, let's just do, I'll show you this on the front end. There you go. So there's your title tag, and then here's your meta description.
Yep.
So this is how it's going to show in the, in the actual search results. And you can see that, Google has updated its platform, and they do allow pictures. So, I see a picture here and a picture here that's associated with the actual location. And then this is the header tag.
Yep.
So this will be your H1, will be really establishing what your page is about. Then you can have H2 or H3, which are subcategories of that header tag. And then let's go down a little bit. This is a little trick here, having written out directions from, different landmarks that are nearby the store. This is a great way to associate the location with different attractions and landmarks and popular areas. And then here's H2, right? So then they also have the keyword in the content. So you can see that's not, if I did a search here, cannabis. So it looks like we have it in there twice. So you don't want to overdo it. You want to put it a few times within the content naturally, right? It needs to read for a human, not for search engines. And yeah, that's it. I mean, that's where it is strategically placed on this page. So just being really, being really specific on how you're targeting each page. And if it's a blog post, only talk about one topic, but then the title tag in the same place as the URL structure. You can see on the previous URL, it actually had Cloud Cannabis /dispensary/Michigan/Ann Arbor. So you can see the URL hierarchy there, and you have Ann Arbor Dispensary, and then their domain name's Cloud Cannabis. So you have all those keywords and everything within the actual URL.
Yeah, and none of that was stuff. None of that was really created with very little thought. It's all really about when you're thinking about how to approach your keywords and your on-site content. And it's all about mindfulness. Be mindful about what you're doing, because somebody's going to associate that with your brand, and you want to have a really good brand reputation at the end of the day, because that's going to help with sustainability and really get those new users in the door. So yeah, it's really about being not overdoing everything. It's about being wise about when to lean into something and when to maybe not lean into it as heavily as you would like to.
Yeah, and then as far as the URL structure, I showed it to you there. Like, do you have any top tips for setting up the URL structure like as a standard?
Yeah, I would say think about it from a pathway perspective, right?
Mhm.
So what I see a lot of is xyz.com / especially if it's a blog, the name of the blog, right? That's
Yep.
fine at the end of the day. But what you want to create is a hierarchy for a user to be able to like understand where they came from all the way through, kind of like breadcrumbs in many ways. So what I always recommend is for whatever page you're building, is it associated with a page at a higher level? So if we're going back to that Cloud Canvas example, we have that store page, but it's associated with their dispensaries in the state of Michigan. So we have a state dispensaries page. And then that state dispensaries page is one layer lower than their overall business location dispensaries page. So we have dispensaries there as another part of their URL slug. So what you want to do is you don't want to create a site hierarchy for the sake of creating one. You want to actually make it so there's a tangible reason why it's there. But I would say being able to establish a URL structure that a user can look at and say, oh, okay, I came from this page, and that's how I got here. And you want to make it super easy for the end user, and then also super easy for the bots to be able to just scroll through URL structure, and it just helps them when it comes to parsing and all that kind of good stuff for your data.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And then as far as the title tags, I did show you how it appears in Google search results. So that's going to be the first main
Yep.
header. And then the meta description is right under that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And on the title tags, actually, it's funny because you and me have a slightly different opinion on title tags. And I don't know if your opinion has changed, but I'm of the opinion of keyword and then brand name after the bar. I forget what it's called, that up and down bar.
Yep.
But I believe, if I'm not wrong, you prefer brand first and then the keyword after the brand name. So we have a slightly same basic format, but just flipping of positions. And I think for whoever is doing the title tags, the most important thing is your primary keyword should be in your title tag. And I think if you are within a character count, your brand name should be in your title tag as well. I think those are important to have because they do impact your rankings. On the meta description side, I think it's more of a sales pitch. It doesn't impact your rankings, but it does impact your click-through rate. And that, at the end of the day, has influence on your rankings. So it doesn't make sense to keyword stuff your meta description. It's more about like, if you had an elevator pitch for 10 seconds, what would that be? How do you get someone to enter your store from Google? And that's your one opportunity. There are times where Google will look at your meta description and say, it's not worth it for me. I don't like it. And they're going to pull something from your website directly. So you're going to have some of that once in a while. But I think looking at your metadata in the lens of your brand and your target keyword for your title tags, and then your sales pitch in your meta description would be a really great step for those two elements.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think that, if you have the keyword in the beginning of the title tag, it's going to help you rank faster.
Yeah.
It's just going to give you a little bit of a nudge. But then once you establish first page and #1 rankings, and you have built the trust and authority with Google, then you could, probably move it to the beginning, because your brand, like, you want your brand to be associated with that keyword as well. So there may be some opportunities there. And, keep in mind that the limit is between 50 and 60 characters of a title tag. So you really want to keep it under 60 characters, so you can, see most of the time, 90% of your titles will display properly in search results. So keep that in mind when putting together that content. And I think we're coming up on time here, so we'll have to save some of the next content pieces for our next SEO webinar. So to recap today's webinar, SEO 101 for Cannabis Dispensaries, we covered how to do competitor analysis research. We really dove in deep into keyword research and how to implement keywords into your site and your SEO strategy. Plus, we started to look at on-page optimization, right? Like implementing your keywords and your URLs, your title tags, your header tags, meta descriptions within the content. So we really covered a lot today. And don't forget that we're going to cover the next phase of our SEO webinar series. We're going to be covering, let's see, schema, featured snippets. We'll also be diving into off-page optimization, so looking at listings, looking at link building strategies for a single store and multi-store, cannabis retail chains. And I want to thank you again, Samer, for joining us today and really taking the time to dive in deep. And excited to have you on the next session to share some of your expertise with our audience.
Thanks for having me. It's always fun chatting with you, and yeah, I'm excited for 102.
It sounds good. And just to recap, Mediajel is here to connect, cannabis brands and retailers with cannabis consumers through our network of mainstream publishers, mobile apps, games, and TV. We help cannabis companies advertise on Google so they can do paid search. And we support an SEO, which is what we're covering today. So, there's a lot of ways that we can activate marketing campaigns on your behalf and activate data with display advertising campaigns to support e-commerce sales as well. So really covering every step of the customer journey, and we're here to serve you. So Mediajel, you can schedule a meeting with us at mediajel.com, and we'll be happy to help. See you later.